Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well. We have a really awesome event today. We have invited Troy Leonard, he's the senior campus planner, to come and talk about what campus planning is planning to do, what they have done, and let's open up a conversation about our campus, accessibility, and things of the sort. So I'm going to pass on the microphone to you, Troy, and thank you so much for coming. We're really appreciative.
Thank you very much. Thank you once again. Oh, let me switch the camera so it's just a little, oh, maybe. Should I maybe step back some? That's okay. Great. Thanks once again, and welcome to the Campus Planning for Accessibility talk, sponsored by the Ally Project. Again, my name is Troy Leonard, and I am a senior campus planner here at Northeastern's, I have to always look at this, Planning, Real Estate, and Facilities. We recently rebranded and we incorporated two groups, so it doesn't really roll off the tongue just yet. I'm trained as an architect. I graduated at the Boston Architectural College a while back, and I'm a licensed architect in the state of Massachusetts. When I practiced architecture, my introduction to Northeastern was a project at the Matthews Arena. That was back in 2009, and we were responsible for really renovating the hockey locker rooms. I think that was the catalyst for the project, but it ended up being a building-wide project where we brought the entire building up to accessibility standards. So I learned a lot about accessibility as it pertains to code requirements, but also I got to interact with the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board quite a bit. And that project ended up winning an award for incorporating accessibility into historic preservation. The Matthews Arena was built in about 1909. So I'm very proud of that. And that was something that really kindled my interest in accessibility. And I think that's maybe why Sandra Schiffelbein had tapped me to give a short talk and open up the lines of communication. So thank you for having me. In the talk, I'd like to really explain who we are at Campus Planning, what we generally do, examples of some of the projects that we think address accessibility. I want to go through some of the code concerns because for me, that is sort of the guidelines in which I begin the conversation, generally speaking. And there's code requirements that we need to do for, to even get a building permitted, but there's other, I think it's good overall design. And that I think ties into my work when I was a residential architect when it came to universal design. So I tried to take some of those ideas and bring them into, just good overall design sense. I'd like to talk about some of the things that we have targeted as future projects, and then sort of give a couple of points of how I think we're going to be moving forward as a planning department, and then take questions. So maybe open up to dialogue. I can't stress enough that I am not an expert in this field. However, I think I have plenty of access to people that we have consultants, we have a whole planning department behind us, as well as the organization of Planning, Real Estate, and Facilities. I'm going to keep saying that until it gets better. So Planning, Real Estate, Facilities, short PREF for short, is the department responsible for the planning, programming, designing of campuses that meet the current and future needs of Northeastern students, faculty, and staff. Categories that we address include campus design and development, space, capital planning, which is sort of long-term goals and how we can incorporate a bunch of requests into projects or one project and identify funding that would support that. Sustainability and resiliency, real estate efforts, and those are becoming more and more important as we grow globally. So we have a department that supports that. Implementation of our current master plan and then articulation of our future institutional master plan and our relationship with the city and our neighbors, and development and oversight over lab, classroom, office construction. And that's really my expertise and focus at the university now. So Sandra and I have a close relationship. We meet, gosh, every 2 weeks to a month. We talk about the projects that kind of help immediate goals and what I call project-based planning. So we have planners on our team that think overall, like big picture planning. And then, not that I deal with small issues, but my projects are smaller and usually go a little bit faster. You know, the time frame is just different. PREF maintains funding to support accessibility improvements on the built campus. And all of the capital projects on campus go through a multi-phased assessment. And really what that allows us to do is talk about concerns and ideas at a broader level conceptually. We start to try to identify what sort of money we'd have to put in place in order to address those things. And then we bring that to stakeholders, senior leadership, admin groups, academic groups, and try to get consensus as we bring things along. So we have typically 3 phases of assessments, but there could actually be more than that if the project is complicated or it kind of gets knocked back to a total change in scope. And change in scope could be anything from identifying different buildings to accommodate goals to a different scale of projects, which I'll go into a little bit more detail later on. Give me 1 second. When it comes to accessibility and barrier removal, it's really a collaborative effort. And even within our department, we have operations team, we have the capital projects and real estate team, which is used to be known as design and construction, if any of you may have heard of them. And then we interact with the Disability Resource Center. I think, and I'll actually go over this again, but I think we could do better in opening lines of communication so people have ways to raise concerns to the forefront so things happen a little quicker. Because I think there are, and I'll go into this as well, there are 3 different ways in which we could execute projects. So I'll address that in a couple more minutes. Oh, actually I could do it right now. So there is our work order system throughout campus, and that allows us to address things very quickly that might not have large cost implications. It might be easy fixes. You know, I often refer to that as the low-hanging fruit. So if we get a call in, or you know, if Sandra gives me a call and says we have this issue or concern, we could see if we could solve it with work order. That's done with our in-house carpenters, plumbers, a whole host of people. We have a stellar sign shop. So, you know, we contact them, we collaborate, we try to figure out if they could solve the problem. And if not, we either make that a project or try to roll it into another project that's going on campus. And that allows us to be a little smarter with how we use our resources. We have a bunch of outside contractors that come in and do a lot of projects. So if we could roll in those things and the issues that come up, they could be done quicker and they don't have to maybe go through the longer assessment process, because we just kind of, they made a lot of sense to do and we just do it. The barriers throughout campus have conceptually been identified at a large scale through a study that we worked on, and I want to say that was about 2019. We worked with our consultant Kessler McGinnis, and they worked with the planning department and some of our co-ops, and they walked all the buildings on campus and tried to put together, it's a custom database that was built just for us that explains what the issues are, what the barrier is. It briefly identifies what the fix could be, attaches that to a funding, and then gives a priority on where they should fall on the list. And I believe that priority scale or system was worked with the DRC as well as the planning department to try to give it. I think it was a scale from 1 to 5, and when you had ones that were a higher, I think actually, in fact, 0 is the most critical. If there was 0, they would try to get pushed to the forefront and be addressed sooner rather than later. The study talked about key issues and not comprehensive issues necessarily. So a key issue would be the fact that a room doesn't have a sign on it, or a sign that is accessible, or has Braille on it. So that's a key issue that's flagged or identified. The comprehensive issue is the fact that the size of the Braille might be off, or the contrast might be off, or the exact height might be off. So we tend to, in that survey, we hit the key issues, and then we plan on always bringing back a consultant to look at the comprehensive issues as we get further into this. We're finding an issue that rose recently at Richards Hall, where there was a list of key issues, and then when we started to attack those key issues, we brought a group in, and I think we needed to get a little bit better. We missed a lot of the comprehensive issues that had some real cost impact. So we had to get back to the design drawing board and incorporate those. So that unfortunately delayed the project some, but it's still, I think, now on a better track, and it's going to get to a better product. Which leads me to my biggest challenge of campus, which is campus. It was built, a lot of it was built after the boom, after the Great Depression. Enrollments grew, and it led to our first group of new buildings, which are those, the white brick buildings. Some people might not like them aesthetically. I happen to think they're very nice aesthetically, but as far as accessibility, they are a true nightmare. Basically, because give or take a couple feet, the first floor on almost all of them is up 5 to 8 feet above grade. So even if we were able to have a sensitive solution to get you into the front door of the building, there's another set of stairs to get you to the first floor. So those buildings aren't going to be easily solved, and we're doing our best to put in ramp systems and then try to find other ways. Luckily, some of our buildings connect, so I think from my perspective, there is an accessible route, but it is not the same route as everyone should be taking. And I think that's really our goal here. So as we look further into master planning and the bigger projects, those are true targets. For me personally, I am working on a planning study for the first floor of Hayden Hall. So that's, again, where I'm going to take the KMA study as a first pass, saying, okay, they have identified these list of 20 or 30, there might even be more. That's our first list that we give to our consultants, our architects, their consultants that deal with accessibility. And then they go in and they layer on top the other things that we need to solve. Hayden Hall is another one where I want to think a little bit broader. If we have the opportunity, I want to think about the exterior and the grade, and maybe there's an opportunity to either enter a different portion of the building that's accessible off of grade, or actually raise grade, which is maybe a little pie in the sky, but we have to start to think about some drastic changes in order to mitigate these obstacles. So that was sort of what I think is the bad news, but I think the campus is constantly making improvements. Mickey and I were just talking about this building being one of them. The very fact that the ISCC has this pedestrian bridge that's fully accessible, that connects the ISCC with the rest of campus, I find ties our campus together, and we're definitely growing on this side of Columbus Avenue. So not only is it a way for our students and staff and faculty to get across, but also our neighborhoods. It's an easier way, an easier boundary. I think the bridges that were crossing over the tracks were very hard to navigate. Even people that didn't have mobility issues, the steps are always cracked, they're not well maintained. And actually getting to them sometimes poses a challenge because of some of the city sidewalks are cracked and poorly maintained. So this is something where we as Northeastern can have under our umbrella and maintain. And I just think it's a great thing. There are smaller scale projects that I think have a lot of benefit. There is a an exterior reworking of the Veterans Memorial that we have over by sort of, I think, across from Shillman Hall. And that's a new ramp of brick pavers, providing access to both sides of the memorial, so that, you know, we're thinking about, especially memorials that you're supposed to like really maneuver around. We want to make sure that's accessible to all. Forsyth, I put this on the list, although it's still not done yet. But we have reworked the ramp to get into the building. The exterior grading and accessible slope has been fixed to a degree where it's not as steep as it once was. Handrails and a new ramp were provided, and widened the hallway on the first floor. I want to toot my own horn a little bit about the Matthews Arena. That one, we put in a whole new elevator, which was challenging because of the subsurface water level. So I don't know if anyone knows, but Matthews Arena is basically built on piles. You know, this whole section of campus was all infill. So when we dug the pit for the elevator, we found that it was taking on a lot of water. So there was a whole waterproofing effort. It's a huge job, but that allowed us to distribute accessible seating throughout, including, I think it's known as the doghouse, where, you know, all the students go up and cheer on the team. So that was a huge win, I think. We also rebuilt the press box, and it wasn't hard to improve because the existing press box was up in the rafters, and you had to take this really small stair. It's almost like a ladder with lots of head hitting issues. So we abandoned that, we took it down, and then we built basically a 2-level press box that allows actually better improved use and better visibility to the ice surface. That was a great one because it allowed me to work hand in hand with the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board. Because we needed a certain quantity of seats in the press box, it needed to be 2 levels just because of the structure of the building. And I reached out to the board and asked them if the seating that we were providing for wheelchair access, if that was actually going to give the same experience as anybody that would be able to go down the 2 steps into the other level. And through a series of 3D modeling, we were able to articulate that it was going to be a very similar experience. So the board allowed that to be compliant. And I think to the letter of the code, it is not compliant, but because we had that, it was I think a very good collaboration. Also, I don't know if anyone's been through Matthews Arena, but there were loads of issues with how protrusions into the accessible aisle, if you would walk through any part of the building, because of the structure being directly related to the seating risers, there was a lot of hazard just by navigating. So a lot of all of that was really solved by just having the right barriers that would allow for caned indication, so you would understand where the edges of boundaries were, and then we'd actually build out walls where there was, not allowing people to kind of go anything underneath 6'8", so there wasn't an issue with hitting someone's head. We do have some future projects targeted, and I don't know the time frame for this because, as I was saying before, the approval process is complicated. The funding behind it wants to be tied into bigger things, and we want to really look at our new institutional master plan as an opportunity to clear a lot of these as far as permitting is concerned as well. But some of it, I think, is easily attainable. We are looking to improving accessible routes at Cabot, Curry, and West Village H. We're designating more accessible parking at Gainsborough and Columbus Place. There's an installation project for accessible signage in Davenport Commons and International Village. Removal of protruding objects at Egan, Ryder, and Snell Library. And this is by no means the list or the definitive list, but it is some of the things that my colleagues have identified as our current targets. And again, I was saying that there's a great opportunity in that institutional master plan and our capital improvement projects throughout campus to really incorporate the removal of physical barriers, because the project scope is large scale. So when we have to displace a whole floor of people in a densely packed area, it's got to happen to do any other modification. So why not tackle all of these issues that have been on our list that will improve mobility and access? As I was mentioning before, codes and regulations are really our starting point in our guideline, starting with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. That's our federal law that sets these guidelines. But then, as far as specifically, we have the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, which I mentioned multiple times, and their requirements, CMR 521, that's part of our state building code. So if we don't hit those, we're not going to get our permits. We're not going to be able to get occupancy into a building. And its jurisdiction is really for any new construction, all new construction, and then renovations. And I believe the trigger for a renovation project is anything over $100,000 that would need the project itself to be fully accessible. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean that the whole building has to then come up to accessibility standards. It allows for these smaller scale renovations to still happen, and then just in the confines. There is then also we keep track of the amount of renovation that we put into each building, because there is a trigger. And once you hit that certain threshold, which I can't state for you right now, once you hit that trigger, then the building is required to be fully accessible. And that's a trigger that the cost is accumulated over, I think, about 3 years or so. Excuse me. Some general ideas of what the code issues I try to incorporate in all the designs include are really the clear path of egress and travel, the limits of protruding objects. Things are allowed to protrude off the wall, but there's a limit of 10 inches, and also where that height is crucial. Maneuvering clearance at doors. There's, if you look at every door, I have it ingrained in my head that at a very minimum, it needs to be 12 inches at the push side, 18 inches at the pull side. And you wouldn't believe how many times that kind of sneaks past a lot of young designers, and you have to catch that. But it is critical, and that ties into, I think, a better experience for everyone, because once you start putting doors so close together, it becomes like more of a rabbit warren. And we all know some of the conditions at United Realty Complex. That's one of the, hopefully, the buildings we fix, if not the near future, hopefully soon, or sooner than at some point, I should say. We focus on the doors, as I told you, focus on the clearance in restrooms, desks, counters, reception areas. A common mistake is that reception desks are set at 36 inches, and that isn't compliant. Sometimes they're even higher at 42. You need an area that's 30 inches so that you can have interaction with people that may be in a wheelchair. Wheelchair spaces at assembly areas is especially important when you have fixed seating, because once upon a time there wasn't any. And not only is it have to be identified, it has to be distributed throughout an auditorium or a place where there are multiple options for someone in a wheelchair to sit and enjoy the same choices as everyone else. Exterior, you look at curb cuts, which I think we still need some work to do, getting some curb cuts. The slope of the walkways is another thing that's I wouldn't say it's a big problem, but it's something we have to watch, because it's not only just the slope going down a path, but it's also the cross slope. And sometimes settlement causes some big issues with that. So there's walkways that should be reworked over time. Stair dimensions are normalized. The handrails, the width of the handrails, the extensions of the handrails past the top step and the bottom step are set. And then there's criteria for toilet rooms and clearances for that. off the wall, the requirement for handrails. The handrails are such a valuable thing, not only for public toilet rooms, but this is just a no-brainer I brought into residential life, because people might not think of it now, but even as people age, there's a great use for handrails, and they just come in handy, even for simple things like hanging towels. So that is part of where I think we should be thinking, not just hit letter of the code, but also try to incorporate these things as just normal design process. Building alarms, there's visual alarms as far as audible alarms, and those are requirements that have to be maintained, and our fire department comes in and they have a process which is called ringing out a building, making sure that all those things are synchronized in the proper manner. The decibels are within the range that is acceptable. The signage throughout buildings needs to be a higher contrast. It can't be too reflective. The mounting height is important. And then there's raised and brailled characters. And again, I want to just give a shout out to the sign shop. I think they do a fantastic job. But if there are issues, we definitely want to hear about them. And which kind of brings me to sort of, looking forward part of this conversation, which is, I think generally our department, as well as other departments, want to create more opportunities for the community to provide input and prioritizing which barriers are addressed first, and really have the user's standpoint. That's the one thing that I'm the most naive about. I don't know, what the obstacles might be. And again, I take this from a code perspective, which again, doesn't really solve all the problems. Like it's a good first pass in my opinion. We're definitely going to engage, well, I shouldn't say definitely, but we are proposing that we re-engage with Kessler McGinnis and look at our overall planning exercise again, have them go through the barriers once again, and maybe tighten up our database. One of my criticisms coming new to Northeastern, again, the database was a little hard for me to understand because it is such a complicated document, but we have a great group that's working on that currently. Thank you, Barbara. So in case anybody did not hear that, Barbara had mentioned that she's working on pivot tables, which means that we're taking an existing database out of FileMaker Pro and I think putting it in Excel, but the pivot tables will allow us to manipulate the data more easily. Thank you. And I want to take this opportunity to mention we do have an ADA focused planner in-house. We had one for years, but that person went to another institution, unfortunately. But now we are lucky enough to have Lydia Scott as our ADA focused planner. I'm going to give her email out right now, which is ly.scott@northeastern.edu. But again, you could reach out to me. If my contact information isn't out there, I hope Allied will just distribute it to everyone interested. Sandra is also a good touch point through at least the College of Engineering. But for those of you that are under other colleges, you could always reach out to the Associate Deans of Administration and Finance. And typically they have a group under them that interact with our groups. So that's a good way to do that. Disability Resource Center is another way, as well as OIDI. With that, how did I do on time? I'm okay. I'd like to take questions or comments or concerns.
Hi, I'm on Zoom. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, I'm Marley Robinson. I'm a student at Northeastern. I'm the president of a disability club here, and I'm also a power wheelchair user. So I just wanted to ask, I have a couple of questions actually. But first up, I was just wondering, are there any plans in place to make the dorms more accessible for specifically wheelchair users? Because when I was a freshman, I was only given the options of Willis Hall and International Village as areas where I could live, where they would be accessible for me. And neither of those dorms are really meant for freshmen.
Mhm.
A lot of the freshmen live on the other side of Huntington. So a lot of students who are forced to live in accessible housing often kind of miss out on some of the social aspects of living with other freshmen, being able to make friends who are your own age, and starting out at Northeastern for the first time. So I was just wondering if there's any plans to make those more accessible.
The short answer is I do not know, but I'm writing this down and I will socialize this with the group. I think it's a very good point. I think it's something that we definitely need to accommodate. So I think, is there a way to get your contact information so I could follow up with you?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I can either email Allied, or if you have your email, I can also email you and give you my contact info.
That's great. I keep
I'll
looking
go
at the
ahead
screen. I
and put
realize it's in front of me as
Troy's
well.
email in the chat. I'll go ahead and put Troy's email in the chat.
Thank you very much. Is that
And then
Sandra?
Josh, yeah,
Thanks.
and Josh can put it on the website as well.
Okay,
Perfect.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I do not have the answer.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask.
It's good. It's a great question.
If no one else is asking questions in the room right now, I also have a couple of others. I know for myself, and I know a couple of other wheelchair users on campus, a lot of the automatic door openers break a lot of the time. It's not really a question, I guess. I just wanted to let you know that. Right now, I think especially there's a door opener near the dining hall in International Village, which breaks pretty often, and there is a wheelchair user that lives there. So it's pretty difficult for her to be able to, go to the dining hall whenever she needs to.
So that one, my first instinct to say is we need to accomplish the fix with work order for the immediate fix, but I think there's a bigger issue there where we might need to look at a different kind of opener.
Mhm.
Um,
I actually about a different kind of door opener. So with my disability, I can't really use door openers anyways because my arms are too weak, so
Yep.
I can't reach them. But I found the other day actually in the Prudential Center, there's an amazing door opener near the T stop. It's like a really long vertical door opener that I can just push with my wheelchair.
Hmm.
So I can just kind of drive into it and it opens for me that way. So I don't have to use my arms. So if there would be a possibility of installing those at Northeastern, that would be amazing.
that's great feedback. If you don't mind, I'd love to continue this conversation through that email if you could just put that in the body of the email as well, so I can track
Yeah, of
this.
course. Sure.
This is great. I was not aware of that, in fact. So that's going to be great for me to see as well.
Yeah, of course.
Question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So I know with the door openers, a lot of the times there's like a switch up top that'll get turned off by people that are using it,
Hmm.
like security or in a lot of cases. And so sometimes all it takes is a switch. And so what my question is do you interact with the people that work in the building at all, or is that kind of separate? Because some of these things can be fixed by just having people be smart about keeping accessibility.
I think it's a great comment. And the answer is yes, we do work
Troy,
with these
could
other.
you repeat the question? We online couldn't hear it.
Yes, the comment was that a lot of times there might be a functioning opener. However, someone like maybe building maintenance or staff will actually disable the opener with a switch that's on the top of the opener. So then it's inactive. And the question was, do I have a way to communicate with those people that might be doing that to educate them that, we have to get better at, if you need to turn it off for a minute, maybe the door is monitored as well. Does that sound like something that might be a good solution?
I don't really know what the best solution is.
Yeah.
But related to that, in some of the bathrooms, there'll be like an extra garbage can that's right in that spot where it goes.
Yeah.
And that's pretty common. And it seems like it's design related, because if you need extra garbage cans in the bathroom,
Yeah, I've noticed that, and especially now that we've kind of come out of COVID, what was happening, I think a lot of it is the hand protection for opening the door, but there's other ways to address that as well. So these are, what happens is, I think my course of action on some of them will be to put in what we call an SCPR, which is a space and project request, but in this case, it's a project request. That allows it to be seen by our operations group and discuss it, like how are we going to like have the next step, so that it's more than just an email to me or an email to Sandra that, she has tons of other stuff and she could send that email to me. However, this way we're tracking it and we know what's happening.
I feel like incorporating it into training at some point.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, please.
Okay, so this is Mona. I don't know if you can hear me on Zoom. I'm trying to articulate loudly, but so I don't necessarily have the mobility issues. I do have sometimes the issue going upstairs and things like that. But one thing that I was curious about, even in a building like that's new, like ISIC, which is great and really like accessible in a lot of ways. But one thing that I personally struggle with is when I press the button for the elevator, if it's the third elevator all the way to the right, I sometimes don't make it there in time. But even then, I've had the doors closed on my cane multiple times. And it's just because it's slightly a longer distance, or just navigating because I'm standing in front of the buttons with the elevators. I was wondering, is there like a way to just literally encode those doors to stay open for like half a second longer because the elevator is like a little bit further out? And are there like in new buildings that are coming up like that consideration, that kind of thing? And I'm blind. I don't know to give perspective.
Short answer is I think they can code that. So I think that's a matter of me, again, reaching out to the operations team, seeing what we can do on that. I think that's an easy fix. That's one of those work order, low hanging fruit sort of things. I got to talk to Lydia about the second part of that comment, which is how do we make sure that knowledge gets incorporated into our new renovations? I don't have an answer for that yet, but I think we could start the discussion.
We have some questions. Chat.
Oh, yes.
I'm happy to read the questions in the chat.
Oh, could you please? I'm really
Yeah, sure. So Joanna asks, is there anything that can be done about the elevators breaking often? I understand elevators are going to break, but during the last couple of months, it seems like the elevators are just constantly breaking. And I can understand why that's a huge issue if the elevator is the only way to get where you need to go.
I don't have a satisfying answer for this one. I don't know. I don't know why they're breaking. But again, I think there's a larger discussion that we need to have.
And I think that's something that we can incorporate into the feedback that we're collecting here. Sam, who's at the Sherman Center, Entrepreneurship Sherman Center, she asked, as a sort of culmination of all these issues coming up, it might be helpful if we had some sort of committee or team where we could manage and maintain these types of equipment tools rather than having them break, putting in a work order and waiting for it to be fixed. So one thing that we could do as Allied, we're creating an action plan for campus, not just for accessibility, obviously, but for all of disability awareness. And so that committee might be part of that action plan. That's a great idea, Sam. Mona, do you want to mention the path from the door of ISIC to the elevators? I thought that was a really interesting thing that I had never thought about.
Sure, I'm gonna stand a little closer, just so people can hear me. And I've already like talked to people about this, but I haven't put like as much effort. And it's something that, for example, Ilham Gabor, who is trying to help me out with it. But one thing, just for everybody out there, because a lot of it is because it's human related. As I try to go from the door to the elevators, there's that whole cafe downstairs. And sometimes people move the tables, like even though, for example, Ilham has heard me and like tried to move things aside, but like people have moved the tables or the leave their chairs or the wires, and I've literally walked into things or tripped over wires. And I feel like there needs to be like a clearly designated pathway from the door to the elevator. Like if I need it, I bet you other people need it too. Just like a constant pathway. Maybe we put one of those like ropes or like things that designate the line in an airport or something. Something that simple, just to keep a path very distinctly clear from the main door of ISIC to the elevator. I mean, I'm only speaking about my personal environment because that's what I deal with every day, but it's just a thought for everybody out there to just think about that. Or even just walking down the sidewalk. I mean, it's not an issue I've come across at Northeastern, but a lot of times I could be walking and do you all know about those like scooters? Like people just leave them in the middle of the sidewalk. So I presume they're not just like a blockage for me, but they're blockage for people who are using wheelchairs. But for me, it's almost surprising. Sometimes I come across it and I might trip. So just this concept of just being aware where we're leaving things. And then just also for a place like ISIC, I feel like by design, it was kind of designed to be like more like fluid, but really having that boundary of a path between the main door and the elevators. So I think, yeah.
It's a great point. And in fact, it's not just a inconvenience. In fact, it's a big safety issue for everyone, because I think that path of egress, that's the most important thing in any building. And that's messing with the path of egress, and we need to fix it. So you said Elham is helping you with that currently?
Yeah, but like I feel like maybe some support would be awesome.
Yep.
I'd just like to follow up on that topic too about people moving furniture in the outdoor area outside of the law buildings, in that kind of patio area where there's a lot of like brutalist seating. They recently added a lot of new furniture in there to encourage people to go outside during COVID.
Yep.
And a lot of people will move the seats into like the front of the ramps. So if I get to the top of the ramp and there's a seat there, I can't go across and then go down on the other side. So that's definitely an issue that I experienced too.
Thank you for letting me know that. Yes, Barbara.
One thing that strikes me is that is there any kind of mechanism like to have people speak about their personal
I think there
Just a
are.
reminder to repeat the question. Can't hear it.
Okay, thank you. The question was, since we're having this great feedback about issues that are coming up, is there a mechanism in which we can start to have a process so people know that they're on the list and they're being paid attention to? Is that a good paraphrase, Barbara? Where would you go? And I guess naively, I thought that, the Disability Resource Center might be a good step, but I think we need to be better at making that public or publicizing what we want to be the right way to communicate. I don't know if we have it.
Maybe the campus planning committee can have like an inbox for accessibility related campus planning issues.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great idea.
Yeah, I'd also just like to mention it might not be the best idea to go through the DRC for these issues, just because they're extremely busy right now trying to deal with accommodations and everything. And they're also a little bit short-staffed right now. So this probably wouldn't be one of their priorities to deal with this, because they have to help with academic and housing accommodations and dealing with all sorts of different issues. So it might not be the most effective way to go through the DRC.
It's a good comment. Thank you. Yes, Mickey.
Yeah, so I'll speak up so you don't have to repeat. I'm Mickey. I'm a PhD student here. I'm legally blind, so I have some vision. And so demographically, it's interesting because if you want to make your facility accessible for the totally blind, it's a little bit different than making it accessible for people with some vision who don't use a cane, right? Because it's kind of a new thing that I think people, and I'm part of this new wave that are trying to understand this. But so you solved the problem. You said, okay, this is accessible for totally blind, but is it accessible for people who have some vision, but don't use a cane?
Yep.
And it's a whole different, and it's actually probably the larger demographic in a lot of ways. So just coming over here today, I noticed the steps outside the library. So outdoor low contrast steps. I actually snapped a picture of it, but they're completely invisible to me. So if you're standing at the top of the steps and you're looking at, and like I said, I think there are some over by Richardson too, plenty. And I haven't been over there today, but they're just completely, if I'm just walking along, I know there are stairs there somewhere because of just my gestalt of, I feel like I'm higher than the horizon.
Right.
But so I end up walking very slowly, and I sort of toe tap forward to find the descending step. And the footbridge too, coming over here, similar. The stairs are, those are a little better than the ones inside the library. But so I think what I'm just trying to express is the currency that we need to think about for people with low vision like myself is contrast.
Yep.
So like the steps that are in this building, if you the big main steps that go between the first floor and the second floor and the big foyer there, those have a nice little contrast line along the top of each step. So if you're coming down the stairs, you can actually see where the edges are.
Right.
With low vision. But the outside ones are completely, the stone ones are just flat and featureless.
Yeah.
And it makes me, either if I'm in a rush, I fall, and I've done that before on this campus, or what happens most often is I move along very, very, very slow, and say, "Gosh, I wish I brought my cane,"
Right.
which I didn't. That's what I should do, and that's obviously like that puts you in a weird spot, saying, I think someone like myself should just have a cane, but the demographically people with low vision don't.
Yep.
And so if you have good vision other than depth perception, you're probably not going to use a cane, and those stairs are completely invisible to you.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be my main concern with the.
High contrast is just good for everyone anyway.
Yeah.
Like it's not just even like the idea behind this is making things accessible is going to end up working for a lot of people, not just one type of person. I think that's kind of what it comes down to.
I think a protocol that might help is to snap a photograph, because your perception, your three-dimensional perception with your two eyes, binocular vision, is different than what you would get through a photograph. And a photograph is closer to what I get with my one eye, because I don't have good depth perception. So if you're looking at descending stairs, and you look at them as in a photograph, you kind of tell that the whole thing is, you can't pick on the picture where the edges of the steps are.
Right.
So that would be one simple test that you could maybe add to the design process to say, like, oh, are these visible?
Yeah, it's really helpful. And you're right. I think the new buildings were getting better, but the exterior is a whole different world.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's 200 years old. A lot of these areas.
But I think a lot, actually, in some cases, it's a low cost option where you could fix it, and so we just have to identify. And
there's aesthetics too. Like outside of this building, there are stone benches that are also, it's a different problem, but they're also difficult for me to see as well. Like as I'm walking, just trying to find the door to come in. And another issue is, you have a glass door at the end of a row of glass windows. So someone like myself is trying to find, where is the door? Is it here? And I push on a window, and then I move over 5 feet, push on the window. There's a very little distinction between, at least I couldn't tell, between the door. Now, these are things that after orientation you learn, but I'm not on campus very often. But a new student would orient themselves, learn it, and then it wouldn't be a problem anymore. Similar to the location of stairs. But if you're trying to be accessible in general,
Yep.
Some of these things are worth thinking about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that.
But yes, as I was probing around looking for the door, I found myself tripping over a stone bench that I didn't even see was there.
It turns treacherous.
Yes.
We have another question on Zoom. This comes from Abigail. When it comes to closing buildings during summer or during breaks, is there a process to review and make sure that the needs of disabled people on campus are still being met? For example, I use a manual wheelchair and can only comfortably access IV dining hall if I'm by myself. If the dining hall closes, I lose access to food.
That's another one where I don't know the answer to, but we're going to have to make the group aware of it.
I love the idea of having an email address or some kind of inbox where all of these requests, I think, as Troy said, like, oh, that's a good idea. Like he just awareness is really helpful. And then the people with these who have these ideas also have a voice. I think that's a very straightforward suggestion. We can have that as one of our outputs of this event.
Sorry,
that's the-
just to, oh no, I was just gonna say really quickly, someone messaged me a couple of minutes ago about the IV door opener for the dining hall, and they mentioned that the reason why it doesn't work a lot of the time is because the door gets locked. So even if you hit the button, it just won't open because it's locked. So that's the issue why it won't work.
Huh. I have no.
Training kind of issue.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. Any other?
Sorry, yeah, I can keep going. I also just wanted to bring up, I'm not sure if you guys would be able to do anything about this, but the elevators in Ruggles and also the elevator to get up to the Isaac Bridge, people often will pee in them. And so if you're in a wheelchair, your wheels get urine on them. If you're a manual chair user, that's really gross because you have to touch your wheels a lot of the time. So I know it's a common occurrence in Boston, but I was just wondering if, I don't know what the fix would be for that, but it would be great if we didn't have to encounter that issue.
I totally understand. I don't know the fix either, but this is, the best I could do, especially at this point, is put a list together. The top of the suggestion is getting this inbox set up for us where we have an email address that we can collect these things or some sort of way to collect these ideas. I think take it one step at a time.
Perhaps the elevator that Northeastern owns might be easier to manage than the elevator at Ruggles, which is a city elevator. But even just a cleaning protocol, like we can't control what people are doing, and the elevator always has to be open. So, and it can't be manned all the time, but a cleaning protocol, if it got cleaned once a day.
I think it does get cleaned pretty often, but you can still sometimes smell it. Like they try to cover it up, but it still kind of lingers. So it's hard to like guess when a puddle might show up. So it can happen any point in the day. So even if it is like once a day, you would probably still encounter it.
That would be a place to start.
Yeah.
Once a day disinfecting.
Yeah.
Right. That's a tough one, and I wish people wouldn't do that, but it's not the reality of it. Okay, we're coming up on time. Is there any other? Of course. Yeah, of course you can.
Come up so I can.
Yes, of course.
So I'm quadriplegic. I don't have any use of my hands, and I'm used to warm weather. So coming to Boston was a bit of a shock in terms of the weather. But I'm always trying to stay inside when it's raining or anything like that. So when I think about buildings, so this is thinking about future projects to improve overall accessibility.
Yep.
I often think of buildings as a way to stay out of the rain to get from point A to point B. And so it'd be really helpful if you keep that in mind, designing new buildings as ways to get through. So if you have an accessible entrance on one side and not on the other, that doesn't help. And so some of the older buildings around here are like that. But I really like the tunnel system here. It's just not all of it is as accessible as I would like it to be. Some of there's a really steep hill kind of in one spot that I know of. And there's an elevator up into the cabbage gym that you have to have a key to use. And I take public transit to get here. So usually I'll get off on the Green Line and come over, and I work here in ISAC. So it's a bit of a commute across, and it can be hard to get down into the tunnels as soon as I would like. But basically, I just wanted to let you know that I think of buildings and tunnels as a way to get through as well, and that's really important. And so the bridge is really nice too, that goes across ISAC. During the summer, right when I started and moved out here, they were doing some work repairing the library. And whenever they were doing work, they closed the elevators. And so that was a huge issue for me.
Yeah.
So going forward, if there were more bridges, that would be awesome. And the other thing I wanted to say is, and this accounts for or applies to bridges as well as other buildings. I always like to have a second option of route. So an elevator or a ramp. And I know it's not always possible or feasible, but if possible, it's always nice to have multiple options of getting up to where I need to go.
Understood. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I just want to let you know my perspective as a person in a wheelchair who's been to a few different camps.
Yeah, it's certainly helpful. And to your point, I was describing ways to get into buildings, but not get through them, right? So you're getting you to every floor isn't the same as using it like similar to the tunnel system. Hi, Barbara.
I'm curious if people use that as a way to navigate the campus. I know that they are working on greater than difficult for visually impaired, and higher concept, audio. I'm just curious if people how they're going to get to it.
I literally used it today because I don't come to ISAC very often.
One second, I'm sorry. The question was, how often do the campus maps get used, and are they effective? Sorry about that, Mickey.
No, I was just going to say that I used it today, and I did find it. It took me a while to get oriented and figure out where I was getting off the train and how to get over to ISAC. So I would just echo the point that it somehow could be better, more visible.
I'd like to just bring up really quickly. So the club that I'm the president of, it's a disability club at Northeastern. We are going to be working with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to work on a new campus map. They are working with someone within Northeastern's geography department or something. So we're going to try to be able to make a map that shows all of the accessibility features for campus, showing where elevators, ramps are, anything for people who are blind or hard of hearing, or where accessible routes are for wheelchairs. So the project is, I think, going to start up soon. If you are disabled and want to act as like an advisor for the project, you can reach out to either our club or the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I think we are going to start in the next couple of weeks on that.
Maps are a tough problem for the visually impaired. It's not an easy problem to solve. So they're easy to complain about, but I would be happy to help with that. But it's a tricky. I've struggled with maps my whole life.
There's one last thing in the chat real quick because we're out of time. Important to mention that the steep ramp in the tunnels over by Hayden is a big safety concern, especially when rainy or snowy. It's easy to slip and difficult to stop in a wheelchair. It does get wet often.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious, Abigail, do you have suggestions of a fix for that? Is there a handrail, different surface?
There is a handrail on the ramp. It doesn't work too well. I'm a wheelchair user, so that's my perspective. It doesn't work super well for a wheelchair. I did bring it up to the DRC last fall just to bring it to their awareness. And they suggested putting a rug at the bottom. At the very least, it provides some friction so that someone on wheels would not slam into the wall, and also as a space for someone to dry their feet off so they don't make the ramp more wet.
Yeah.
But that's the only other fix for that I can think of besides fixing the ramp itself.
Did a rug not get provided?
It did not.
It's steep enough that it's hard to push up as well.
Mhm. Well, with that, I want to thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it, and the comments were amazing. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Troy Leonard, for joining us and sharing the work which Northeastern has been doing. I hope that this served as a platform for a lot of inputs for Northeastern's campus planning too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining. I will be sending out the feedback survey for this event to your emails. And I would also request you all to join us next Friday at 3 p.m. using the same Zoom link, and in ISEC 655 for the final event of the Allied project for this semester. So we are inviting Mrs. Michelle Wallace, the Associate Director of Northeastern LGBTQA Association. She will be giving a unique talk about unlearning ableism. So I hope to see you all next week here in ISEC 655 and using the same Zoom link. Thank you all for joining. Have a great weekend.